Hi everyone, my name is Vina, aka Miss WC Reader, and welcome welcome back to my channel. So let's talk about 2022 reading goals. So as far as genre, I feel like the goals have been met this year. I was really reading a variety of different genres, even if I had my favorites that I mainly read, like fantasy and romance. I still read more nonfiction than I usually read. I even read a poetry book, and I got to explore some different mediums like graphic novels and comics, which I don't normally read. So I felt like 2021 was just a year that I really tried to read all different types of stories. Now I really want to talk about the content in those stories and the types of plots that they have. One of my reading goals for 2022 is to read more all black casts, specifically in the fantasy genre. Surprisingly, it's very hard to find an all black cast in fantasy, unless you're reading like African inspired, and even then you have to be reading adult African inspired. Mostly because a lot of the YA, you go in expecting an all-black cast because you're like, it's African inspired, but then there's always like some token other, usually some token Asian person. And I don't know why, because other people do not put us in their stories like that, yet black authors always feel like they have to write these we are the world ass stories where they represent everybody. And I'm not sure where that push is coming from, if it's like editors pushing for it, if it's agents pushing for it, but we are the only ones who have to consider everybody else when we're writing, and I don't like that. In fantasy, there is just no reason why we can't have more all black casts. Like you can have people with magic running around, but it's like we gotta have white people up in this place. In your wildest upon wildest dreams, you can't imagine us just being in an environment amongst ourselves. And then when we get into contemporary fantasy, a lot of times the plot is racism, which is a whole other mess. And it's like, again, even when it's fantasy, we have to be considering white people and their feelings and making sure we teach them XYZ. So I did see some books that look kind of promising for 2022, and I'm hoping we get more blackety blackness in fantasy where we don't have to worry about others. One of my goals is to read more black urban fantasy, which would be fantasies specifically in those big cities with black casts. I read 2 this year, but I really like that modern representation, like, because I've read good African inspired ones, but there's something about reading about black people who have magic in a world like yours that just hits better. And as much as I like small town when it comes to my romance, I like big city stories when it comes to stories that are going to have action and adventure. So I did get some recommendations this year of stories that I'm going to read next year, and hopefully I can just get a lot more urban fantasy. I know it's not really something that traditional publishing is really giving right now, so I'm definitely going to have to go on the indie side to explore my options. And another goal of mine is to read less hype books. I think this year more than ever I fell into the hyped book trap and read everybody's favorite authors and every book that everybody was saying come on and read, and those ended up being the worst reads that I've read this year. Like, a lot of books that like I'm still traumatized by were very, very hyped reads. I really got like a lot of readers burned this year by everybody saying, oh my gosh, this is so amazing, it's so good, 10 out of 10, perfection. And then I read it, I'm like, the characters are barely characters. I still don't feel like I know these people, and I read like damn near 400 pages of them, and the plots just weren't hitting the way they should. So next year, I'm not reading everybody's hyped bestsellers. In fact, there's certain authors, like, I've read multiple stories from you guys now, and y'all just aren't giving what y'all say y'all books are supposed to give, so I'm not doing it anymore with you. I will let the people who are stans go ahead and read those stories. One thing that I want to continue to do is really, again, read more of those graphic novels and comics that I kind of dipped my toe into this year. Like, graphic novels / comics were one of the reasons, like, I kept enjoying fantasy in the first place. When I was younger, like, Witch was a very popular comic, and they had just brought it to the US, and I devoured that series. Like, I found a website that had all the comics on there, but translated to English, and I would just for hours flip through the pages reading the story, and that really inspired my love of Magic Girl stories, and it really inspired my love of elemental fantasies. I love, like, elemental based fantasy, I really do. Like water, fire, earth, air. Once those are the magic powers, I love it. And I know everybody's like, oh, those are basic. They're classic and you can do so much with them, and I've seen so many twists on those stories. And that's one thing I want to do, is read more graphic novels, because they also give differently, like, than reading like a book with chapters upon chapters and lots of words. Like, this year I read a nonfiction book that was a graphic novel, and it was about black warrior women and black slave revolt, and I would have never read that story otherwise had I unless I had had it in this format that just made it so much more easy to access and read. And graphic novels really be giving me these stories that publishers don't necessarily want to put to big full-length novels. So I'm really enjoying, like, the different areas that they're exploring. And then when it comes to my romance reads, this year I did a lot of backlist black romance reading, and it was really enjoyable, so that's something I definitely want to continue on to. But I also want to read more indie romance. It's something I keep saying that I need to do more of, but I'm not getting to those stories. So next year I definitely want to make it a priority. I started reading some, and I really enjoyed a lot of the stuff that I read. It was giving what trade pub ain't given, and I've connected with a lot of black indie authors whose stories just sound like what I need. I'm also working on this black romance project, which is a black romance for every US state, and I'm stuck on the last 6 because they're just like the whitest states in the country. But a lot of that list, I was able to find a lot of backlist titles and indie titles, and I'm trying to show people that there's more black romance out there than just the ones that you are seeing in traditional publishing. And there's more black romance than just the same few people. Like, yes, we all know Beverly Jenkins. Yes, we all know Brenda Jackson, but they are not the only OGs. And there's so many people writing a variety of stories. Like, the goal is to really finish this list and have books by 51 different authors to show there's beauty in black romance and there's so much diversity. And then once I'm done with this US list, then I want to kind of start branching out to other parts of the world. That's definitely a goal for 2022, to continue to explore just the variety that black romance has to offer. And one of my reading goals in 2022 is to really explore more stories with different types of experiences. Like, I was just reflecting on the other day how with a friend how I haven't read a lot of books where black people are raised by their grandparents, but that's very, very common. Like, I've met so many people who were raised by their grandmother because their parents weren't around for whatever reason. And I know most people know at least one person who's been raised by their grandparent as well. Like, I've had multiple in my family, so even though that wasn't my experience, it was an experience for a lot of my cousins. And that's just not on page enough. And I think the only story I've read recently where that was depicted was in a picture book that was specifically trying to depict that type of relationship. So I would love to see that present in more stories. And I would like to see more stories about like army brats or people who grew up with families in the military, because again, that's an experience that I've only read about like once or twice. Like, I read about that I think a couple years ago in a middle grade, but I don't see that often. And I know people in my family who were in the military, and I know people, I've met people who grew up in the military or who went into the military and had kids. So that's another unique experience that should be pictured more. And like I said, I'm just really looking for those different experiences. I would love to read more stories about people living in the Caribbean. I like romance, but there's not a lot of Caribbean romance out there. Most of us can only name Sweet Hand, which love Sweet Hand, but we definitely need more of those stories out there as well to see how those people are living and to show that they love each other too. And I would love to see more African romance and just different romantic stories about Black people outside of the US, because we're loving on each other all over the world. So it would be nice to see more of that depicted. I would love to read a story about Black travel bloggers. So I really want to see that happen. I don't know, if it's not written, maybe I need to go write it myself. But various different unique experiences is really what I want to see more of. And I'm going to try in 2022 to see if I can get more of those stories. So let me know in the comment section some of your reading goals for 2022. I'm really interested to hear about what you guys have planned. And as always, remember to hit that like button and subscribe, and I will check in with you guys soon. Bye!